Welcome all of you here to our panel, Faith Matters, and we're going to have a dialogue about faith in a secular world. I'm going to pass it on to our moderator, Father Michael Buck, who will do the introductions and start the panel.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, and thank you all for joining us today. This week is designated at ACU as Faith Week, a week where we discuss, share, and celebrate an aspect that's an important and integral part of the lives of so many people in our community, but very often that we don't discuss, share, or celebrate, but we sort of keep private. So it's about opening up conversations and ideas. And we're joined by an excellent panel to explore this idea of faith today from the three great Abrahamic traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And so we perhaps, should I introduce everyone with their bios now at the beginning to avoid, it might be disruptive if I do it later. I suppose I'll begin with Professor Ismail to my right, who's representing the Islamic tradition. He has a PhD, his doctorate from Leeds University, which he achieved in 2000, and worked then at Sakarya University in Turkey, where he taught and wrote on Quranic studies, classical exegesis, and contemporary approaches to the Quran, interfaith dialogue, and also Orientalism. He's interested in the place of Muslim communities and their activities in a globalizing world, together with the study of interfaith dialogue. His most recent research focuses on the Ibadi tradition, the relationship between sounds and meaning in the Quran, classical prison literature in Islamic societies, and the status of women in Islamic traditions. In January 2008, he was appointed to the newly established Fethullah Gulen Chair in the study of Islam and Muslim Catholic relations here at ACU. And he concluded that chair in 2014. Since 2018, he's been working part-time as a professorial fellow here at ACU. To my left, Professor Joel Hodge represents the Christian tradition. He grew up in Brisbane and completed his doctoral studies in religion at the University of Queensland. He's published various books and articles, including Resisting Violence and Victimization, Christian Faith and Solidarity in East Timor, which was based on his doctoral dissertation. Drawing on the Timorese people's stories, that book explored the nature of the Christian faith and church in the context of violence, and particularly how Christian faith provides the basis for forgiving and non-violent resistance to violent oppression. Joel also utilized the thought of René Girard. He has an active interest in East Timor and speaks the local language Tetun. He's currently the national head of ACU's School of Theology. Last but not least, above me, we've moved from right to left to above, we're joined by Rabbi Ralph. Rabbi Ralph has a passion for social justice and creating bridges between different cultures and faiths. For him, the purpose of religion is to create a better society for everyone and to engage with the critical issues facing society. In 2018, he was awarded an Order of Australia Medal for his services to multi-faith relations and to the Jewish community of Victoria. Rabbi Ralph is a trained counsellor with a master's degree from Auckland University. He sits on Glen Iris City Council's committee responsible for the Reconciliation Action Plan for recognition and integration of First Peoples. He also oversees Yad B'Yad, a premarital relationship program. He's a member of Swinburne University's Research Ethics Committee and a member of the Department of Health and Human Services Ethics Committee. Rabbi Ralph held a number of senior rabbi roles, including most recently at the Caulfield Hebrew Congregation for 14 years, and he continues his role as principal rabbi to the ADF, a member of the Religious Advisory Council to the Minister of Defense, and a board member of the AIJIC, which is which I don't know what the acronym is. Perhaps Rabbi Ralph can tell us. Australian and Israeli Jewish
Affairs Committee, some kind of title.
Okay, wonderful. He's eminently qualified to speak representing the tradition of Judaism, and unfortunately joins us by Zoom due to a recent COVID diagnosis. But thankfully, though the flesh may be affected, the mind is strong, and so he continues to be with us to speak today. So thank you all for joining us. I know that the bios, in my point of view, they can sometimes be tedious, but it gives us an idea of who is sitting in front of us, their own experience and specialty. So today we're here with these three spokesmen of their traditions and men of faith to speak about faith as it declines and expresses itself in these three great traditions. And so as much as we might divide faith into these theoretical traditions, it's always incarnated in people who believe. And so I'd like to start the conversation by moving from speaker to speaker and for you to be able to personally speak to us about faith in your life, and in particular, the meaning of your Jewish faith, Christian faith, or Islamic faith. So perhaps let's draw the rabbi into the conversation right from the get-go to avoid the, at times, distance that can be created by the online connection. So Rabbi, even though you can't see the amphitheater, it has filled up while I've been talking, and there is a group of largely students and some staff who are here. So would you be so kind as to start us off by telling us, what does faith mean for you, and how would you explain the Jewish or the faith of Israel?
So thank you, Michael. Tell me if I'm not projecting, if you can't hear me. Thank you for your introduction. So I want to just thank Jeremy as well. I really had hoped to be in your beautiful building. Just even from what I can see from here, it looks great. But I didn't want to spread the COVID love, so I'm doing this from home. But I'd say faith for myself, I think about it, if you like, as an old friend, which I discovered in my youth. Faith is a friend of one that I can rely on in times of both hard times of despair and need, but also can call on to share with me some of the good times. So see it, just as a true friend, we hope is someone who doesn't just tell us what we want to hear, but a true friend is somebody who challenges us, who doesn't just accept simple platitudes from us, I like you, I believe in you, and everything will be okay to just stay close to me. I think faith is a good friend in the sense that they are a critical friend who challenges and who helps me wrestle with my doubts and with my despair as well. And faith for myself is also a fertile ground for finding meaning, for moral clarity, and for giving me moral courage, and especially in these kind of difficult times we're in now, but just helping me get through every single day. I wake to faith. In fact, since, as I'm sure in many of our traditions, some of our opening words are to thank God with an act of faith, and that is what I do when I wake up in the morning. Guides me through the day, and it's something that at the end of the day, as I'm reflecting on the day, I also reflect through my faith.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Ralph, not just for the explanation, but for such a great image as a friend as well, and to look at it through that lens. Professor Ismail, would you be able to speak from your perspective?
In Islam, actually, faith means iman, and iman comes from emniye, security. Can you hear me? Faith means security and confidence. Really, it is extremely important. And in Islamic tradition, when you look at the Quran, there is a very strong emphasis on the oneness of God and the unity of God. And Islam means total submission, to Allah Azza wa Jal. So it gives you extreme power to really resist calamities, turmoil in your life, any test, any trial. But at the same time, faith has another dimension. Not only you remember your God when you are in a desperate situation, but you have to remember your God in a blessed situation. And it really, faith is a two-dimension. But personal side is really very important. You know, to be honest, I discovered my faith when I was 50 years old. And I started reading the Quran, you know, learning the Arabic when I was 10 years old. And nearly 40 years, I studied theology, Islamic studies, and classical sources. But, you know, I didn't realize the importance of faith in my life going through a certain period. But there's another dimension of the faith is really social dimension with community. And I am very strong believer of a person, you know, the faith actualized actually in community. Of course, we need our personal faith, but community is far more important than to this collective, you know, collective faith is empower every single person. You know, we are just finishing our Ramadan fasting 1 month, and I spent maybe half of this month breaking my fast with non-Muslims, not only my Muslim community, but also with my, you know, you are, with the help of faith, you are building bridges. And it is, you know, this total submission. And life is, you know, when I look at the many of my friends here, I saw them, they are very, very young people. But with the passage of time, when you get older and older, and you realize how precious to have a faith, to rely on, to depend on God. And this is really not for, I mean, I don't want to take too much time, but last thing is, you know, we have a connection with God, we have a connection with family members, we have a connection with friends, community, in wider community. But we have also in Islamic tradition, we believe this connection with the unseen, transcendence. There are, you know, we have a potentiality to really connect. And we have many subtle faculties, mechanism inside. And we have to revive, and we have really energized these faculties. And you know, the last thing is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, talks about halawatul iman, the test of the faith. And I believe if we really internalize, for me, my Islamic faith, for Joel is for his Christian faith, and I am sure for Rabbi, his Judaic faith, we test our, you know, this delicious faith. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ismail. And finally, moving on to Joel from the Christian tradition, what does faith mean for you, and what is the Christian faith?
Thanks, Father Michael. Thanks, everyone, for being here. It's a great joy to be able to talk about faith with you. I'd say a couple of things. Firstly, that faith is deeply personal, I think, and that's, for me, true. And what I mean by that is not so much that it's deeply individual, like it's only for me and for no one else kind of thing, but that it has something that speaks to me at a very deep level, into that heart level. And it's something that speaks to me in a relationship as well. So for Christianity, of course, faith is a relational thing. It's a relationship with someone, with God through Jesus. So it's deeply personal on that level. And trying to describe faith then is kind of trying to describe this complex, multifaceted, beautiful relationship that I have with God and then with his community, his people. And if any of you try to describe that, of course, it's very difficult. It's very challenging to try to describe that, I think. But if you did try to describe it, there might be a lot of beautiful words that you would use, but I think for me, that relationship is about a constant accompanying, loving presence that God is with me, kind of like what Ismail was saying, in the good times and the bad times. And I always have that sense in some fashion that God is there. And particularly, I think, during the really challenging times. The other sense I have, and this is a little bit more intellectual, is that something about faith that answers the deep yearnings and questions that I have. And I think especially when I went from high school into university, going into an adult faith, there were some big questions that I really needed to come to terms with. And faith helped to address and answer those questions for me. So, what does it mean to be alive? Why am I here? Why do we exist? How do we deal with evil and suffering? What is the purpose and meaning of life? Faith helps to answer those questions for me on a deep level, in a way that nothing else can really answer. Science, literature, politics, they can't really answer those questions. They're deep existential questions that only faith or religion can really grapple with. So faith kind of operates on those levels for me, I think.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for getting us started with these perspectives. Something that strikes me as coming out in all three responses in some way, shape, or form was a distinction that Joel mentioned explicitly between faith and religion, although only in passing. And Ismail spoke about really coming into your faith, I think in your later teenage years, that you mentioned at a certain point that it became more significant for you. And even with this idea of Rabbi that faith is a long-term friend, although presumably at some point that friend enters into your life. So given that there seems to be a manifest distinction amongst people who belong to a particular religious tradition and yet who may or may not have a personal faith, is this a valid distinction between faith and religion? And how should we best understand that? Is it necessarily antagonistic, or could it be complementary? Rabbi, would you like to come back in? Do you understand where I'm getting at, what I'm getting at with the question? I think you might be on mute.
I was hoping one of the other would answer, and then I could get better idea. I think I have an idea where you're at, but if one of my fellow panelists is more ready to go, I'll ready to come in after.
So the question is the relationship between faith and religion. I mean, in Western religious studies or theological studies is a little bit different. It's history of the religion. If you look at, they generally talk a lot about this primitive starting of religion. First humankind have a polytheism, and then slowly move to, the theism and one God or other things. But from my own religious perspective, really we don't distinguish a lot between faith and religion. They are, they complementary. I mean, of course, there are many people in modern time. They identify themselves as a spiritual, without religious entitlement or engagement. Even some people try to find inner peace or spirituality without believing in God. To be honest, my humble understanding from my Muslim perspective or Islamic perspective, what I go through, I am not, discriminating in other people. We cannot, divide the people, believer and unbeliever. We had a great respect. Everyone is the creation of God. But for me, I mean, really, the religion and the faith has a very, very strong relation, very, very strong relation. Faith and practice is very important. You know, I mean, for me, faith is, as I told at the beginning, is regulate, you know, formulate, and adjust my life with my family life, my friends, my relation. You know, Joel is my boss. I don't need to take, you know, the bullying courses or sexual harassment courses because I have my faith already taught me this kind of things. So this is just joke, but really, I mean, for me, you know, there are many Muslims who are not practicing. They have faith, but they don't practice, and this faith really carry them and help them to really live their life. So, I mean, we are in a very secular society. It is very difficult from my humble understanding, you know, the religion, the communal gathering, or, you know, the community, living religion in a community is extremely important. And this is look like shrinking now, but most probably I am praying and hoping that people will realize what they are really, where they are going, and they realize and then come back this solid ground one day. And I mean, this is my reflection actually. I really don't separate this religion and faith.
What do you think, Joel? Is it a valid distinction there?
I think there's something that you could say that's different about faith and religion. I think in the modern context, we've tended to separate them probably too sharply. So we've thought about faith or spirituality as individual, and then we've thought about religion as kind of communal or organizational or hierarchical, or about tradition. And so we've kind of separated the two, and sometimes the individual is the good one and the communal religion one is the bad one. People get alienated from the institutional. And there's something true about that. The faith is personal, like I said. There is something that each of us has to commit to in our lives to get us up in the morning, to motivate us to live a human life, you know, to give us meaning and purpose. But you can't strictly separate that aspect, that fundamental aspect or foundation of our life from the communal context in which we live. We are relational beings. So if we want to answer the fundamental questions of life, why are we here? What does it mean to be alive? Is there a God? You know, what's the meaning and purpose of existence? How do we relate with others? How do we deal with suffering and evil? If we want to really come to terms with those things at a deep level, we can't do that on our own. We need help. And we need relationship because we're relational beings. So if we're going to actualize our faith, I think if we're going to really go deep in terms of what it means to be human, we need other people. And we need them for a number of reasons, but we need them because we're relational beings, but also we need them to help us answer those questions at a deep level. We can't do it on our own. And for the Christian tradition in particular, if faith means belief or commitment to a God who is love, well, of course, then faith is something that is inherently communal. It's going to take us out beyond ourselves. And the religious impulse or the human impulse is always to go out beyond ourselves. The impulse to go in on ourselves is a problematic impulse. It leads us to cut ourselves off from each other, to withdraw from each other, and it diminishes us. The basic human impulse is to go out beyond ourselves. And the Christian answer to that is love, that God, the universe, our human life is characterized by love. And so if we want to actualize ourselves to the fullest degree possible, we need to engage in that love thing. And that means engaging with other people. So faith then involves religion. That is, it involves community, and involves structure, it involves relationship, it involves tradition, and so on.
Rabbi, would you like to come in with anything now after the responses of Joel and Ismail?
Sure. I think that I'm trying to remember, there's one of the prophets, I think maybe Jeremiah, saying at one point, even if you don't believe in me, believe in my law, believe in what I stand for. And I think in that way, it in many ways defines, for we know within Judaism, we have many Jewish people who identify as Jewish, more call themselves culturally, or they identify with the religious group called Judaism, but they don't see themselves as people of faith. And they will sometimes tell me very directly, I'm coming to the place, I know I'm sitting in the synagogue here, but I'm not actually coming to pray, because I don't actually know if I believe in God. And sometimes I quote to them, maybe it's a bit lighthearted, but there was, and actually one Holocaust survivor who lived here in Melbourne, he said, we lived our lives, some of us, we weren't sure of God, he said, but we lived our lives, even if we didn't think there was a God, we thought it is better to live our lives as if there were a God. And I think that, to me, it was saying that recognition that, yes, that some people may not find the place of faith, but they can still find a place within a faith community, and they can still see the purpose and meaning that can come from, as what you call the relational, from the relational side, relating to people who are believers, people who have connected spiritually. I'm wondering about something you said that Joel, that you felt that the impulse outwards is greater than the impulse inwards. I wonder if it's not if they're not both equally strong. That we have, as the one sage, Hillel, great sage of Judaism, said, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? You may not nearly me, but then he says, if I'm only for myself, what am I? Which was kind of that duality that for faith, we need to dig deep within. It's a deeply personal connection to a God that is meaningful to me, that I find hopefully through the tradition that I was born into. So I think that is for most people, I think that is the easiest way. If people are struggling to find God and who God is and what God means to them, I think if they are within a framework, within a tradition, it is easier to start there. But I think that there is that inward impulse, but there is also that outward impulse. Is that faith on its own can be a very lonely experience. One of the great Jewish philosophers of the 20th century, Rabbi Soloveitchik, wrote a book called The Lonely Man of Faith. Today, you probably call it The Lonely Human Being of Faith, which he talks about the loneliness on an individual level that faith can be, but also I think for people of faith, and that is something that Ismail was responding to as well, is that especially in a secular kind of society like Australia, we may sometimes feel we are the lonely people of faith, that we are almost on the outside of our society, with the growing number of people who say we do not believe in God. So I think that, to answer your question, I think there is that faith, and Judaism says that you can find faith within your religion, and that you can be a religious person or you can be part of that religion even if your faith is lacking, or or you're not sure about it, or where you're taking it to. So, in a word, I think that we can be that the challenge of today's society is to find meaning and purpose. Other people and our faith, if we're born into one, can help us find that, or perhaps if we reach out beyond that, it can help us on that journey, or at least an exploration of what faith is.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Can we speak a little bit more about that, perhaps leaning into the context in which we find ourselves which, as you mentioned, really can very well be summarized in Australia as secular. I mean, most people, we see that with every census, that fewer and fewer people express any sort of faith or religious adherence, and the number of atheists and agnostics are growing. And so it seems an uncontroversial observation to say the general trend in Australia is moving away from faith, even if there'll be some discussion about what does it mean to be spiritual but non-religious, or agnostic as opposed to atheist. But I don't think it's controversial to say that the general movement is away from faith. And therefore, that presents, I suppose, a challenge to be people of faith. How have you experienced that difficulty? Have you been the subject of discrimination as a person of faith, or simply that you feel misunderstood? And how do you navigate that tension? Would you like to start, Rabbi?
I suppose that for myself, I sometimes do have that sense perhaps of aloneness that we can have within a secular society. But at the same time, and I think this is maybe something that Ismail was alluding to as well. I think, and maybe Joel too, I think we are meaning-seeking creatures. I think we all need a sense of validation and a sense of that our life has purpose and relevance. And to me, that is, and I imagine to our my fellow panelists, that's a spiritual. It's something spiritual. It's a deep existential human need for meaning. But I think that as people of faith and people of religion, we can actually help people connect to meaning, and therefore, I think that we have a special challenge and a special task in a secular society to help people recognize that our faiths that have been around for thousands of years have got that wisdom, and have got it's a tried wisdom to be able to help people articulate and to express what faith can bring to life.
Thank you, Rabbi. Joel?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when I was younger, I certainly felt that religion was something, obviously, that a lot of people were not only not interested in, but were some degree hostile to. And I think there is still some of that hostility around, though I think some of the hard edge of that hostility maybe has declined, specifically because that new atheist movement has kind of lost some of its momentum. So I think a lot of people are in the kind of category that Rabbi Ralph was talking about, looking for meaning and purpose, but in a whole lot of different areas. And we do have a really special role to help them with that. But I think that experience when I was younger of hostility, even within kind of the Catholic world or Catholic schooling has influenced me, because I always had a sense that, being involved in religion or having faith was not something that was popular or attractive or something that other people would accept easily. It marked you out as something different. So, and that was a struggle to come to terms with, I think, how, in a sense, to be able to be comfortable in that space. Not comfortable in the sense that, I'm always at ease, but to be able to be not worried or afraid about people's reaction or what have you. Just being able to own who I am, what I believe, and what I can offer to other people along the lines that kind of Rabbi Ralph was talking about. And that other people are searching too, that a lot of people are open. They're not always closed off, but some people are closed off. They're not always interested in religion or will look at it in a funny way. But there is something there with people that we can offer, particularly if we can scratch away under the surface of what the initial reaction of someone might be. But I think there is some of that strangeness, hostility around still, and that can be difficult to deal with. But at the same time, I think it's an opportunity for us to say, this is who we are, this is what we offer, without trying to alienate people, but to say, look, we're not here to scare people, but we're here to offer something really great, namely, God loves you, etc. So, and that's meant to be a good news message, not a bad news kind of message or a scary message or something like that. So there's that. And I think there is that sense in which a lot of people are just searching, and they often don't know what religion is really about, particularly what Christianity is about. They've got a lot of ideas or impressions, but they don't actually know the depth of what is being offered. And there's an opportunity there to engage with people in a genuine way. But there is that sense of, I'm kind of maybe open to hearing you, but I'm not really religious. There is that. I think that's a very strong attitude in the Australian culture. And how do we contend with that? How do we offer people the opportunity to see the beauty, the richness of engaging with religion or spirituality in a deeper way? How that's going to help people. It's going to deepen them. It's going to allow them to go deeper in that sense that Rabbi Ralph was talking about. I guess I was talking about withdrawal in a negative sense, cutting oneself off from people, but going deep in the way that Rabbi Ralph was saying, deep within ourselves to really know who we are and come in contact with the Spirit, with God in a really deep kind of way that then also takes us out into deeper relationships with other people, kind of that back and forth. How do we offer that to people in a way that's going to be interesting, attractive, joyous for them to kind of take up?
Thanks, Joel. Ismail, how do you navigate this challenge of being a man of faith in a secular society, but then also especially as someone, as a Muslim, when Islamic people are suffering a lot of negative press and controversy?
Yes, especially the women, they are very visible. But the thing is, as we discussed before, faith matures the people. Faithful people, really, faith makes people humble, and they listen to people. I met very hardcore secularists or really irreligious people, and they are very critical. And sometimes when I speaking to them, they are really displaying being non-religious is a privilege, and it is hurting. But to be honest, what I believe is what I have is precious, and I am very pity on these people, and I wish they also share similar experience. The thing is, I'm really very thankful to you and Jeremy to organizing these things. I have a very fond of. I have a theologian. I really like him very much. He lived in late Ottoman period and early Republican period in Turkey, and he wrote an epistle and he discussed in 1918, almost 80% of Muslim land lost, occupied by Western powers. And he talks about, pious Muslims and pious Christians come together and fight against this in his, Soviet Union or Russia. There was a communist revolution, and it is coming towards Turkey, and Turkey become very secularized country actually after the Republican period. And I saw this kind of people in Turkey. I met many people here. As my friends told, really our faith encourage us to I'm never afraid of or shame of my faith, and because it really empowers me, and it is. But the thing is, in modern period, the religious people, faithful people, faith based on knowledge, not only practicing your religious or really we have to equip with very strong knowledge. And as the Quran says, if we live on the basis of evidence. If we die in the basis of evidence. So we have to be really ready to and maturely and discuss with these people. But the final point, especially in secular society, the people who display their irreligiosity and non-belief as a privilege, I always find these people, there's something luck in these people's life. Really, I found them, empty. In Islamic theology, there is a pleasure almost every single sin. You can, even gambling, you enjoy while you are gambling. If you are, fornicating, you enjoy. If you are, doing any unlawful things. But the Muslim scholar says there is no joy in rejecting God. This is in our nature. Really, it is. I mean, my faith embedded in me. I have to polish it, and I have to care for it, and therefore we talk a lot with joy, and this is the Abrahamic tradition. Judaism, Christianity, Islam. We individually, it is very difficult to face these challenges. There are many problems in our schools. I mean, in Muslim community, I'm not going to go into detail every single problems. These are common problems, and I personally, my community personally, couldn't be able to face these challenges. So these interfaith gatherings, the faithful people come together and really collectively resist this, this attack comes directly from very hardcore secular people. So we for minor or individualistic mistakes, they are magnifying and attacking the religious sensitivity. And my final point, generally, the people consider practicing religious people or faithful people is a conservative or traditionalist. And to be honest, I never ever see any person practicing his religion. It doesn't matter which religious tradition he comes from. I found them very modern, really very modern. They are in a very secular society. They are keeping their tradition. They are keeping their values. They are practicing their religion. At the same time, they are engaging with this very, Australia is a very nice country, but religiously speaking, in this environment, they are really coping with them. And for me, it is really a post-modern, a modern approach from religious communities. Thank you. I hope.
Thank you. No, it's wonderful, and in fact, you've provoked me to be the devil's advocate. You mentioned the problems in the past century faced by all people of faith, confronted by the violent persecution of communism, which was, of course, inspired by Marx, and it was a sort of violent atheistic materialism, and it lives on today in communism and socialism. But one of the statements that Marx said famously about faith and religion was that religion is the opiate of the masses and was simply something that kept simple people happy, but that more enlightened minds could see through. All three of our speakers today have spoken of the benefits that faith has brought you and your communities, and that it gives meaning. But perhaps a skeptic, someone like Marx, might say, that's great for you, that you have these stories to tell yourselves that give you a sense of meaning in the world, but it's simply not true. Is your faith simply nice and encouraging stories? And if that's the case, why do you keep bothering everyone else with them? Do I need to pick someone as the victim? Do you want to jump in, Rabbi?
I will jump in, but I refuse to call myself a victim. I think I'll just give one very short response. I would say to Marx and to Marx, and that yes, Marxism, he called religion like our opiate, but I think Marxism itself became an opiate for many others in a way that anything can become. But I want to say, well, yes, possibly, you feel that religion has very little to say, and it's just a fabrication that we create in order to make ourselves feel better and more secure. But when I look at your alternative, I find it even on a rational level, I find your alternative less convincing, more horrifying, and incredibly nihilistic. So if I have a choice between your nihilistic view, which is very often can be a view of that there is no ultimate meaning and purpose in the world, I would rather wager for purpose and for meaning. And you remember, I don't know if you read, there was a little comic thing written on one of the subway walls, written many years ago. It was said that God is dead, Nietzsche, and somebody wrote underneath it, Nietzsche is dead, God. I think we persisted for a long time, and surely our endurance itself can speak of a great truth.
Thank you, Rabbi. Joel?
I think this is a great question. And in a certain sense, Marx was kind of giving us giving religious people a compliment, because he was saying how powerful religion was in people's lives. But of course, he thought it was false. This was a question I was very interested in my doctoral studies, and still am interested. Why do people put any stock in faith or religion at all, but particularly in the worst situations when it would seem most tempting to give it up? Like when you're suffering violence or hardship, when things are just really bad and it doesn't seem like God is there at all. Why would people stay faithful in those situations? And I looked at the East Timorese context under the Indonesian occupation, when they were facing great suffering. Up to a third of the people were killed through various means. And I looked at people in direct situations of violence, when they were straight on suffering violence, torture, whatever, massacre. Why did faith make sense to them in this situation? And I was partly interested in this question because there was all this scholarship on East Timor. There was a lot of interest amongst academics, certain academics, about East Timor, but they'd never really grappled with the question of why the Timorese became so religious during their oppression. They went from like 25% Catholic to almost 100% Catholic. Why did they become so religious during this period of intense persecution and oppression? And there was something in religion, something in their relationship with God, that gave them hope. It gave them empowerment, like Ismail was talking about. It gave them relationship. It gave them a structure. It gave them meaning, purpose, and it enabled them to get through these situations where the people that were doing violence to them wanted to just break them down, isolate them, control them, manipulate them. And religion and faith resisted that, helped them to resist that. It gave them a structure, gave them a relationship. It gave them a meaning and purpose to resist that. And I'm sure Rabbi Ralph could talk about he mentioned the Holocaust before. Ismail can talk about his own experience and other people's experience in Turkey as well, where religion does this for people. And I think in that, the fact that religion does that shows that it's not just an opiate, like it's not just a drug that helps them get through a bad situation. It actually gives people something deeply, deeply meaningful and valuable when everything else fails. When everything else fails, like there were other things the Timorese could have turned to that could have helped them in that situation, including political ideologies. But all of that helped a little bit, but it ultimately didn't help them as much as faith and religion.
Thanks, Joel. We're running out of time. Ismail, would you be able to give a quick response to the provocation, and then we'll just check if there's any questions in the audience?
Yeah. For me, if you look at all prophets, they all work for to liberate their people, to make people free from injustices, free from oppression, all other things. And to be honest, you look at very different perspective. The Marx statement. I see religion or faith is a real freedom. You can only rely on one powerful, unique God and nothing else. It gives me, as we discussed at the beginning, faith needs deep commitment, knowledge, extensive knowledge. And if, I personally, when I read, for example, the Russian history after the revelation, the crime they committed, communist systems committed is beyond imagination. So for me, really, it's an unacceptable statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone in the audience, I've been asking all the questions, I feel a bit bad, but you've all been clearly engaged. Would anyone like to take the opportunity to ask a question of any of our panelists?
My question is, are there any divisions between your respective faiths, and are those divisions important?
Do you mean in the faiths themselves, or between Judaism, Christianity, Islam? Okay. Are they important? Do you want to get us started?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, clearly there are, it's a really good question. And because we've talked about a lot of our commonalities and the common experiences that we have within a secular context, but clearly there are differences between the way in which we would conceive of God and how God is revealed within these different religious traditions, and what emphasis we would put on how different aspects of tradition and how law or other aspects might influence how we construct our ethical positions and so on. So there would be a very fruitful and interesting dialogue we could have if we wanted to get into that. And that they're important to contend with. We can't just pretend like there's one religion or there's one world religion. That would not pay respect to the distinctiveness of every religious tradition and what they offer. Of course, in the end, each of us has to make a decision to say which religion tradition makes most sense to me. How does it work for me, not only intellectually, but in terms of my own life? And we need to really grapple with each tradition's answers to the deep questions of what it means to be human and who is God. Otherwise, we don't pay genuine and sincere respect to each of those traditions. And we need to do that, because otherwise we're not respecting them. So everyone wants respect. We need to learn those religious traditions as best we can and know what they actually stand for.
From Muslim perspective, of course, there are differences between religious tradition, but at least, Muslims are very lucky. Chronologically speaking, they are the last one. So they are very aware of Judaism, they are aware of Christianity. And, to be honest, Muslims 5 times a day in their ritual prayer, they pray, family of the Abraham as they pray family of the Prophet Muhammad. And when you say family of the Abraham, there's Isaac, Ismail, Jacob, Moses, and they pray Ali Imran, the father of Saint Mary. So 5 times a day. So, I mean, there are differences, theological differences, and really it needs to be intellectual engagement with this in a respective way. But there are also huge scope to work together to really overcome modern challenges and the secular challenges. And the good thing is at least, in ACU, we have, for example, comparative theology sessions every month. And from every religious tradition, people come and discuss similarities and differences. And differences are richness, actually. As the Quran says, if Allah will, Allah make all of you, the one religious community. But this is the plan of God, will of God, and we have to respect, but we have to really work together. Thank you.
Would you like to jump in, Rabbi Ralph?
Well, of course, being the oldest, we have Judaism has had hostility, had a long period of hostility with the church, and less so with traditional Islam, but as well being at the receiving end. So, it is important in any kind of recognition in terms of when we talk as faiths, not to try and plaster over and not to deny that there are our differences and sometimes painful distinctions, and sometimes we express it in ways that are hostile rather than friendly. Despite that, we know, and people therefore say that religion is cause of all the problems in the world, and there is unfortunately, today we are suffering. Anti-Semitism has gone through the roof in Australia, across the world. Islamophobia has increased because of the war and because of the situations around. But I think that I hope that people of faith will recognize still that it is in our joining together that religion is not the cause of the problem, but that in the religion we find the solution rather than it being the cause of the problems of the world, that we can find in it the solutions. If we could get the politicians to listen a little bit more to our religious values and wisdom, perhaps it would make something of a difference to the nature of the world itself. And I leave you just with the late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, former chief rabbi, one of his books about the interaction between our religions. He calls it The Dignity of Difference. And I think that we grow, each of us in our own faith, by also recognizing the dignity that our differences of different faiths bring to our world. And I'm really feel privileged that we can live in a society in which is a multi-faith and multicultural kind of society, in which we can still acknowledge those differences, celebrate those differences, and grow stronger in our own faiths as a result.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Ralph. And what a wonderful note to finish on, such a beautiful expression of the gift it is to be in this country, and something that we really try to lean into at ACU in being somewhat unique as one of the few faith-based universities in the country. And so that this is something we can celebrate of all the members of our community to be able to have these conversations and also recognize the positive contribution that there is. So we almost need to destigmatize faith again. And so I think this conversation is one step towards that. So thank you so much, Rabbi Ralph, Professors Joel and Ismail. I'll hand over to Jeremy now, who has a final word.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. This has been the main event of our Faith Week, which will happen every year in semester one. You can go and visit our chapel, light a candle anytime throughout this week when you want to. But I'd like to end with a prayer for faith. Let us pray for the gift of faith, the seedling that takes root in our hearts and matures over time, to be a gift for the upbuilding of culture and all peoples. Let us pray that we can be strengthened no matter our background, and that those who long for it can receive it. Let us pray to God that he may answer the longings of each human heart, and that those who are honestly seeking may find, and those who are open to seeing may see. Let us pray that our faith can be something that builds bridges rather than destroying them, always upholding the dignity of every person, seeing in them the image and likeness of the God who we believe in. Let us make this prayer today. Amen. Thank you again to all our guests today, to Joel, Ismail, and Rabbi Ralph, and Father Michael. God bless you all. See you later, everyone.